In this lesson, we'll talk about evaluating the work of others in primary sources. In a later lesson, we'll be talking about a technique that utilizes critical thinking scenarios, which may be helpful in scaffolding the skills that are necessary for evaluating the work of others in an incremental, low-stakes manner. Before we get started, take a moment to consider whether there are activities or assignments that already exist in your class that do or could provide opportunities for students to critically evaluate the works of others. The skill of evaluating the work of others, and especially primary sources, is present throughout the entire critical and creative thinking process. It is particularly important in the stage where students are gathering and assessing relevant information. Some of the questions that we want our students to ask of the materials they gather might be, have I verified the significance and relevance of my sources? Do my sources represent significant contributions to the domain of my research? Is this source presenting an accurate representation of the topic and content? Is the author being fair and considering alternative conclusions? And are the conclusions logically connected to the evidence? Developed by librarians at the Merriam Library at California State University, Chico, CRAP is an acronym that stands for Currency, Relevance, Authority, Accuracy, and Purpose. This method provides excellent structure for how we can encourage our students to dig more deeply into the sources that they are drawing upon. Currency refers to the timeliness of the information and requires students to answer questions like, when was the information published or posted? Has the information been revised or updated? Does your topic require current information, or will older sources work as well? And are the links functional? Relevance refers to the importance of the information for your needs. Does the information relate to your topic or answer your question? Who is the intended audience? Is the information at an appropriate level? For example, not too elementary or advanced for your needs? Have you looked at a variety of sources before determining if this is one you will use, and would you be comfortable citing this source in your research paper? Authority refers to the source of the information. Who is the author, publisher, source, or sponsor? What are the author's credentials or organizational affiliations? Is the author qualified to write on the topic? Is there contact information, such as a publisher or email address? And does the URL reveal anything about the author or source, for example, .com, .edu, or .gov if it is a website? Accuracy refers to the reliability, truthfulness, and correctness of the content and involves questions like, where does the information come from? Is the information supported by evidence? Has the information been reviewed or refereed? Can you verify any of the information in another source or from personal knowledge? Does the language or tone seem unbiased and free of emotion? And are there spelling, grammar, or typographical errors? And finally, purpose, the reason the information exists. What is the purpose of the information? Is it to inform, teach, sell, entertain, or persuade? Do the authors or sponsors make their intentions or purpose clear? Is the information fact, opinion, or propaganda? Does the point of view appear objective and impartial? Are there political, ideological, cultural, religious, institutional, or personal biases present? Many of us naturally bring some of these evaluation techniques into the classroom. We recognize the importance of having our students vet the sources that they'll be using. The examples and strategies presented here can help us do it better and with more precision and intent. This example comes from a microbiology-themed course-based research experience for first-year students here at NC State. Students were presented with a source of primary literature to read. In part 1, students were asked to write down a basic overview of the work, including providing the title, authors, and journal reference, and an explicit statement of the purpose and focus of the work. In other words, they were asked to put the work in context and state what the authors were trying to prove, disprove, or find out. Part 2 was to summarize the results from at least 2 experiments, including what question was addressed, what was done, and to state the results obtained. And finally, students were asked to provide a summary of their evaluation, including what they learned, what the author stated still needs to be done, and whether the paper was good or bad and why. While the broad strokes of this assignment asked students to evaluate the materials, without more explicit structure and language for how exactly to do that, the outcomes of what students created were all over the place. By including more precise language to the questions they were expected to answer, students were able to dive more deeply into their evaluation. In an improved version of this assignment, first, students were asked to define the scope of the experiment or paper. What was the overall question or problem addressed? Define the scope of the problem that was explored, considering depth, breadth, and perspective. Then, rather than selecting 2 experiments, they dove more deeply into one. They responded to what question was addressed, was it and/or why was it significant to the study? What was done? Were the methods employed appropriate to address the problem? And finally, state the result obtained and its relevance to the overall question addressed by the paper. Students were then asked to evaluate a number of components to the study, including who is the intended audience for this article? Was this article written with clarity for the intended audience? Did the conclusions follow logically from the data and provide an example? Did the authors consider alternative conclusions of the data? Provide an example. Are there any interpretations that you thought about that the author did not consider? And finally, students were given the opportunity to connect this evaluation explicitly to their own work and to practice question seeking and divergent thinking. Given the findings and approach taken in this work, does it lead you to any questions you would like to address with respect to the focus of this course? List as many research questions as you can think of. Select one research question and provide a possible methodology to pursue. Explain why you selected that research question from among your alternatives. In looking at one part of the revision side by side with the original version, you can see that simply adding language that gave specificity to the evaluation was really at the core of this revision. Notice that there weren't any major structural changes to the assignment, but the revised assignment guides students to think more critically. Do you have an existing assignment in your course that you could improve by providing students with more probing question prompts? Introducing students to an evaluation rubric that utilizes intellectual standards can also be a good way to practice evaluating the overall contribution to the domain that the paper or project might hold. A similar rubric can be used in the peer review process.